Okay, you're doing well. You know, most of forklift driving and making a safe environment is common sense. I mean, if you just think I'm a forklift driver, I'm driving a forklift in a hazardous situation where multiple things and changing circumstances happen all the time, but use your common sense. For example, if you're driving over a slippery surface, what would you do? Slow down. Carry your load as low to the ground as possible. Avoid harsh braking or sudden turning. Proceed with caution. These are the sorts of things, common sense things, that will help you in understanding how to drive. And when it comes to your assessment, many of the answers are common sense. But there are some things that you're just going to have to learn. And one of those is what I want to speak about now. It's what we call our hierarchy of control. It's a way of controlling the environment, the workplace, in assessing it so that we can remove or diminish hazards in the workplace and put things in place that give great protection for the operator and for all those around. Now, you will need to memorize the safety control measures we're about to mention here. This is a hierarchy of safety control measures, starting from the top and working down. And therefore, as with any hierarchy, you need to keep them in order. And in your assessment, you're going to be asked for these 6 elements, and you will need to list them in order. And to help you understand that, we've made this little adage up for you. Every Sunday, I eat apple pie. Every Sunday, I eat apple pie. The first letter of each of those letters identifies the first letter of each of the levels in our hierarchy of control. Elimination, substitution, isolation, engineering control measures, administrative practices, and personal protective equipment. Now, the good news is personal protective equipment is always the bottom level for safety in every situation. It's the last line of defense. If everything else was risky around you, make sure you're wearing the right personal protective equipment, PPE, and you will be at least protected bodily if something was to go wrong. But let's start from the top and work our way through our hierarchy of control. As soon as you walk onto the work site, you need to look around and see, is there anything here that's of a particular hazard? For example, overhead power lines. There's a whole heap of overhead power lines coming into the building, and let's imagine that a truck pulls up under the power lines and wants you to unload. Immediately you identify, hey, we've got a problem here. How can we eliminate the problem? Eliminate the risk. That's the first level in our hierarchy, elimination. Well, it's an easy one to fix. Ask the driver to park somewhere else, and you eliminated the risk of hitting the wires. Or for example, if there's a risk of falling, do the work on the ground. And then you've removed or eliminated the risk altogether. And so that's the first in our level of control. The second in our hierarchy is substitution. What this means is, if there's a dangerous element within your environment, substitute it for something else. A great example is if you needed to paint the room with oil-based paint, you could substitute a high-risk product, oil-based paint, flammable, and the fumes, you wouldn't be able to breathe in there while you're doing the job, and for a couple of days after, no one would be able to work in that room. Why couldn't you paint it with an acrylic paint? Substitute the high-risk item for a lower-risk situation, and you have made your workplace a safer environment. So we've got elimination, substitution, isolation is the third. To isolate means to protect people from a dangerous situation. A good example of this is the Telstra workers are working out there on the footpath and they need to fix the telephone line. They open that hole in the ground to climb down and know that now there's a pit that people could fall into. And so what do they do to eliminate, substitute, isolate? They couldn't eliminate it. They had to open the hole. They couldn't substitute it with something else. They have to get down there. And so they put an isolating barrier, a fence around the hole, which protects anyone else from the risk of falling into that hole. That would be isolation. Elimination, substitution, isolation, engineering control measures. These are control measures that are fitted to the machine that you're using to make it safer. This is something that you would have done. A good example is a power saw. You know, a power saw, you're going to cut some timber up. There's a guard that is fitted to the saw to protect you from cutting yourself, and even a safety button that you have to push to be able to operate the saw. Perhaps on a forklift, if you needed to operate in a dangerous environment, let's say a flammable environment, you could have the forklift fitted with spark reducing implements to make it safe to use in a dangerous environment, scrubbers to stop spark, whatever it happens to be. You could have engineering control measures added, and so we've got elimination, substitution, isolation, engineering control measures, and the fifth is administrative practices. We train people how to work in a dangerous environment. We teach you, if you've got to use a power saw, don't put your hand in front of the saw. Don't run through and cut through the power lead and electrocute yourself. Train you how to use the equipment in a dangerous place. This would be administrative practices. A good example is, remember the Beaconfield mine disaster some time ago? A number of guys down in Tasmania were trapped in this mine, but they knew there were people still down there. People were killed, others escaped, but they knew there were some still down there. How did they know they were there? Because their tags were still on the wall. They'd hooked their tags on the wall when they went down the mine, and only when a miner comes out does he take his tag off to indicate that he is now free from the risky environment. Well, because there were tags still on the wall, they knew that there were people still down the mine that needed to be rescued. That's an administrative practice that's been put into place to make sure things stay safe. And the final line of protection, as we've already said, is personal protective equipment. Choose the right equipment for the job. In the planning stage, you need to choose your personal protective equipment. And then, before you begin the job, check it to make sure it's right. Obviously, if you're moving acid, you would have goggles to protect your eyes. But before you start the job, make sure both goggles have got their glass elements in there to protect you. No good grabbing them and then it's too late because there's something missing in what you need. And so we've got elimination, substitution, isolation, engineering control measures, administrative practices, and personal protective equipment. Every Sunday I eat apple pie. Take the first letter from each of that little saying, jot them down in the lines where you need to write your answers, and those first letters will stimulate your thinking. Now, you can't write for your exam, for your assessment. You can't put every Sunday I eat apple pie, but it might just help bring you over the line in remembering, that's something that I mustn't forget. And in the workplace, this is something you can apply every day.